Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Empire of the Full Moon. I'm your host, Mike Cadaver, and of course, Empire of the Full Moon is the show where I talk about all the movies of Charles Band. We may get into some other things like toys and action figures, stuff like that, but for the time being, it's all about the movies. And this episode, I'm going to be talking about Crawlspace from 1986. Now, I came to this as kind of a weird thing, like, why would I choose Crawlspace? It's a 1986 Empire movie that Charles Band didn't direct, but he did produce. And basically, I went and saw Robert Eggers' Nosferatu in the theater on Christmas, and it's now, the 22nd of January. So a little bit over less than a month ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to come home. That was great. So I watched Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire from 1979, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this Klaus Kinski guy, man, this guy can act. And so I started kind of going onto a little bit of a deep dive on that. We actually talked about it on our last episode of the Corpse Cast, where we talked about three 70s exploitation vampire movies, and that was one of them. And so as I'm doing research for that, I noticed that Werner Herzog put out a documentary. Why did I call it a documentary called My Best Fiend, which is about the tumultuous relationship that he's had with Klaus Kinski, even though they made a bunch of movies together. Anyway, so I'm just thinking about that, and then also as I came up to my Best Fiend, I found a little gem that's called Please Kill Mr. Kinski, and it's a 1999 short that David Schmoller made about his relationship with Klaus Kinski on this movie. And it's funny because I'm like, well, I have not seen Crawlspace in years and years, and that checks the boxes for this show. So why don't we get into that? The first thing I want to talk about on there is get into some of the backstory. On Wikipedia, and if you look up some stuff, there's some differing information about where this was filmed. And it was filmed in Rome, definitely. But on Wikipedia, it said it was filmed in something called Cinecittà Studios in Rome, Italy, which was actually founded by Benito Mussolini. But no, this was actually filmed in Dino De Laurentiis' old studio that Charles Band purchased. And so just so you know, and here's why I know that. So in Confessions of a Puppet Master, the book I bring up every single episode, right? If there was a little story about how Schmoller and Kinski did not get along and got into a fist slash knife fight. My goodness. And so I only bring this up right now because I'll talk a lot about that later. I mean, he obviously made a short film about, a documentary, more like an interview called Please Kill Mr. Kinski. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew where I got my information from. It was from that book. He said, Charles Band said, I was sitting behind Dino's absurdly gigantic desk working, multiple space heaters around my feet because there was no other way to keep the cavernous office warm. Just hung up on the phone when his assistant came running in, and I mean, she was literally running. And from there, he was told that there was a fist slash knife fight between Schmoller and Kinski, and so that's where I got that. It's directly from his book, so if anybody wants to correct me, I'm just telling you where I get it, so you can check it out yourself if you'd like to. We'll get into all that later, but before we do it, I want to talk about Crawlspace, but guys, I need you to subscribe to my channel. I have more views than not that I have a lot of views, but I have a lot of more views than I have subscriptions, and it would be great if you guys could do that, so check that out, and subscribe on this platform that you're looking at right now. But after you've done that, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a minute because I'm going to play a trailer for you. And so here it is. And while this is playing, go ahead and click that subscribe, and we'll see you on the other side.
Someone is watching. Someone is waiting. Waiting until you're alone. Waiting until you're trapped. Waiting until you're terrified. You can try to run. You can try to hide. But there is really only one way out. Crawlspace. hell. Crawlspace.
All right, everybody, that was the trailer for Crawlspace from 1986, written and directed by Schmoller, by David Schmoller. And it's funny because we've talked about him before. We talked about Catacombs, which was a movie that he did. It was episode 3 of this show. I recently watched Netherworld out of the blue. So there was I can't remember if it was a Christmas or the Black Friday sale that they had, but there's a bunch of Blu-rays for like $5. So I just bought a ton of them, and Netherworld was one of them. And it's funny because like I remember seeing that a long time ago, thinking it was like, okay, I watch it now, and yeah, it does have that like 90s feel. Like, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. You know what's funny too, as an aside? I remember being in the 90s thinking, man, those 80s, everyone was weird looking. And now we're normal looking because we're in the 90s. But no, we were as weird looking in the 90s as we were in the 80s. And I will stand by that. Anyway, so no, that's a good one. He directed that one. It's awesome. Tourist Trap, obviously a big one for Empire Pictures. It was the first one. And then we have the original Puppet Master. This movie starred Klaus Kinski as Dr. Karl Gunther, Talia Balsam as Laurie Bancroft, Barbara Winnery as Harriet Watkins, Carol Francis as Jessica Marlowe, Tanya McClure as Sophie Fisher, David Abbott as Hank Peterson, and a bunch of other people. But this is actually, this movie kind of takes place in one building, and it was all sets in Dino De Laurentiis's Cinematographica. So anyways, let's get into the story. So Karl Gunther is a landlord of an urban apartment complex in an unnamed city. Karl really likes two things. The first is pretty girls, and the second is euthanasia. No, I'm not talking about Megadeth's great album from 1994. I'm talking about mercy killing. Of course, Gunther's wildness does not stop there. In the urban complex, he is the landlord and probably owns it because of the free use of the attic that he has, and the fact that he's widened and reinforced the ductwork so he can crawl around spying on the beautiful women who live there. And obviously, if you haven't seen this before, it's all about Karl Gunther going around in the ductwork and spying on all of his tenants there. But anyway, so I figure, he has to own it, because without that, the ductwork wouldn't have been that big and it wouldn't have been reinforced because he would have fallen out. And no, that's true. I'm sure he did that, but just because that he did this here, I have to assume that it did happen in Die Hard 2, because anyway, long story short, and I digress. Anyway, so basically, he's crawling through the ductwork. He puts his tenants through little experiments involving intricate remote-controlled trapdoors for rats to scare the inhabitants, and he tries to lure them into his attic lab because he's got a whole lot of stuff going on up there. And just let's stop there for a minute. Because of this premise, you would think there would be one hell of a sleazy movie. And when Gunther is in that crawl space looking upon a young lady for the first time in the very first scene, that's what I figured we'd get a lot of. It was sleazy, and the dude came in, and it was kind of a trickaroo, but she even did some weird stuff. And this is like the Empire / Full Moon Features special, where she's in lacy underwear, but that's not good enough. She cuts. I'm not even gonna say what she does, but she does some weird stuff. Let's say she defiles a bra. Probably cost her about $50 to $100 at Victoria's Secret. Anyway, I digress. So the thing is that's the one time is really the only sleazy time he does it. And it's crazy because a lot of times he'll go and all the girls are in there. They have a new tenant and they're sitting around having a nice old dinner and dessert party to welcome the new tenant. And he pulls out his little gadgets and remote controlled trapdoors to let the rats in. So just wild stuff. So anyways, I figured that goes into more of his, I'm assuming that he has an engineering background because of the reinforced ducts and the little remote controlled traps. And also he even creates a body slider that he can just slide around on this kind of belly board for ducks in the top so he can haul ass. And it's great. It's funny. Anyways, all he really does is things like that, and he makes a lot of annoying noises by hitting his pocket knife on his Steely. Remember Steely's, the kind of the marbles he used to have, just like, anyway. So yeah, so he just does like weird things, and I feel like the reason this movie doesn't get its due in a lot of horror / exploitation circles is because of this kind of stuff. You'd think that we'd get a lot more sleaze, especially if from it being a Charles Band thing. But we get that first scene, and that's basically it. And the rest of it's kind of tame. Well, that's tame when I say the voyeuristic stuff, because he's got a lot of wild stuff going on up in the attic. We learned a lot about him. We learned that he was a legitimate doctor in Argentina. He moved there because he was the son of a Nazi in World War II and a member of the Hitler Youth in his younger days. Though he was a legit doctor in South America, his father was a doctor at Dachau and had some wild ideas about his justifications for murder, something that his son has apparently picked up. And in Argentina, he was doing that stuff, but trying to keep it under control, even though in his tenure there, 67 people died and of euthanasia, and he actually killed the wrong guy because his brother comes looking for him. Anyway, all that having been said, we have a lot of time just getting to know him, getting to know the girls in the apartment complex. And after every time he kills somebody or does something wild, he plays a little game of Russian roulette. So he'll flip the thing, put the gun up to his head and pull the trigger, and he lives. And he says, "So be it," like it was kind of a sign from something else that he is justified in his actions and whatever. Anyways, will Gunther succeed in learning the secret he's been searching for? Is it possible to be self-loathing and have a god complex at the same time? What about this movie had people on the production asking the director to please kill Mr. Kinski? Find out by watching Crawlspace from 1986. All right, I want to start off by saying that without Klaus Kinski, this still may have been a pretty decent movie, but he is such an interesting looking guy that he takes this to a next level. Not only looking, but the way his mannerisms, his facial expressions. He's got a very expressive face, and there's no one on this planet that looks like him. And so with that, it takes it to the next level. And he's kind of crazy. I'll talk about the Please Kill Mr. Kinski in a minute, but he's so very subdued, and I feel like he does a lot of thinking about his actions in this movie, and you can just kind of see the wheels turning, and he really takes this from a regular old, exploitation thing where they would probably have needed more sleazy stuff to make it any good, to that next level where he is an actual wonderful artist and actor, and he does a great job in this, even though he's not really that good of a person in real life. I don't really want to get into that. But even David Schmoller, after we talk about his experience on there, even he had to admit that Klaus Kinski is an amazing actor and an amazing presence on the screen.
But you know what I really wish? I wish his obituary had quoted me saying what a compelling actor he was, how great he was to watch. He really was great to watch. Klaus Kinski. Before
this went into production, Schmoller didn't understand what it was like to work with Kinski. And I guess, it's information wasn't as readily available back in 1985 when this was shot. But he was pumped from the beginning. I mean, he turned in the first draft and he's like, hey, I want this to be an anti-Vietnam War type of thing. But Charlie Band was like, you know what? I don't think so. I don't know if America's ready for that yet. It's still, it's maybe too soon. But so he said, why don't we make it a Nazi? And David Schmoller's like, well, a Nazi? They need another Nazi movie? Don't we have enough? But Charles Band said, okay, tell you what. We'll change it to a Nazi movie, and I'll get you Klaus Kinski. So Schmoller was pumped. He's like, bro, this guy who worked on so many wonderful classic movies with Werner Herzog and others, he goes, yeah. So he said, I'm all down. I'm down for it. Schmoller was all in, and he made the second draft with Kinski in mind, and obviously Kinski's there. But those are some famous last words, because please kill Mr. Kinski. Now, if there's one thing that I want to stress on this episode, is that you need to go see this, and before or after or whenever, because it is hilarious. It's only like 8 minutes long. It's on YouTube. Just search Please Kill Mr. Kinski. It's from 1999, and so check that out. I will say that in Confessions of a Puppet Master, it has a lot of stuff about this whole thing on it as well. I don't want to get too much into it, because you're going to go watch the Please Kill Mr. Kinski. But according to David Schmoller, Klaus was difficult from day one, ranting and screaming, which is so funny because, like I said, his performance was so brought down. It was so like metered that I would never have guessed that. I mean, obviously I can believe it's Klaus Kinski and I've seen some of his stuff. Anyway, he got into multiple fist fights. He got into a knife fight, the one that I mentioned earlier on. And he wouldn't take any direction, so we just kind of had to sit there and film him, and he did what he wanted to do in the time that he wanted to do it. So anyway, like I said, go check out Please Kill Mr. Kinski. And I feel like I've talked about that enough. So I feel like the only way you're going to understand what I'm talking about exactly is by going to check that out. So do it. Another thing is Pino Donaggio did the score, which is actually amazing. This was another thing. I've talked about it a lot. There's a couple of things that take this up one notch from other just being a stupid exploitation film. Pino Donaggio doing this and also Klaus Kinski in this were the factors that took it from just a regular old, stupid run-of-the-mill thing to and actually something you'd want to watch. Now, I'm not saying this is the best movie of all time. I'm saying it's very fun, and these things really take it up a notch, whereas without those, it wouldn't be as good. But we know Pino Donaggio. We talked about him before when we did Catacombs on episode 3, but he did Carrie, Tourist Trap, which is an Empire film, Dressed to Kill, The Howling, and I'll be here all day, even if I just talked about the genre films that he scored, but he has 226 IMDb credits as a composer. So, take that what it's will. And it, like I said, it's amazing. And it's funny because they lucked out with him. And then when Full Moon came around, they lucked out with Richard Band because my goodness, all of these movies have a great score, and that really lifts it up. Anyways. Okay. For all intents and purposes, I like this movie quite a bit. Did I wish it was a little more sleazy? I will say no, because I don't want anybody to tell me, but, it's just not quite as exploitative as I was expecting. However, it's a fun one, and Klaus Kinski in this is Klaus Kinski, and he's great. Like I said, I just watched Nosferatu the Vampire, and it's like I hadn't seen that in a long time, which was funny because I love that movie. Well, long story, but he was great in that. It was crazy. He did he was the perfect subdued vampire. He was subdued in this as well, not quite as subdued as he was as Nosferatu, obviously. But I love this whole setup. The movie is good. I wouldn't say it's super great, but I'd go check it out if I were you. And it's just a good time and a fun movie to watch. So that's all I really have for this episode. Go check out the Corpse Cast podcast at corpsecollective.com. Go check out my Horror Pub Trivia show at horrorpubtrivia.com. I actually created a standalone app where you can go to play horror trivia that I put together for fun. Go to app.horrorpubtrivia.com. Sign up there, and it's just fun. Anyways, check out, always go to corpsecollective.com because that's where all my stuff is. And don't forget to subscribe here. Anyways, appreciate you guys watching. I'll catch you guys later.